So let me introduce myself first very briefly. My name is Marie-Chloé. I work as account manager and workshop coordinator with Human Synergistics Germany, and I am extremely pleased to facilitate today's webinar. Before we start, I actually would like already to thank very much Dino Ragazzo and Valia Kovenberg, who are the heads of Human Synergistics Franco-Belux, for organizing the event and making this happen. So thank you very much, both of you, and it's really a pleasure to be here. Changing our world now. We all went, and actually we are still going through what is called as being, what is understood as being a historic pandemic that may change the way we live, but has definitely transformed the way we work and relate to one another. I think we all experienced that when being in lockdown in our respective countries. However, now that lockdowns are being ending, that the pandemic in some cases seems to be a little bit more under control, it seems that new challenges are arising for organizations. After working remotely or organizing virtual teams, now both individuals and organizations have to find and define what we more and more call the new normal. I guess this is a term that has been coined recently, and again, I'm sure all of you have read it at least once. However, on what this new normal should be based, what are some of the lessons that we can get from the COVID-19 crisis? Maybe what the COVID crisis taught us on ourselves, on how do we perceive our environments. And more importantly, how can we integrate those key learnings and in the way in our organizational culture and organizational development culture processes? These are a couple of questions and topics that this webinar will focus on and try to answer. And to do so, we are very pleased to welcome our three speakers and guests. Adrian Stanciu from Romania, who will talk during the first presentation about how to manage uncertainty. Valia Kovenberg from Belgium will do the second presentation and speak and tell us whether or not organizations are immune to change. And Tim Koppler from the US, who will further develop on the culture mirror survey and process. So some of you are already in the call. Thank you very much. And in any case, it's a great pleasure to have you, and we really look forward to benefiting from your expertise and insights. Just to give you some brief instructions before really start with the first presentation. So the afternoon is divided in 3 different presentations. And between each of them, you will have a 30-minute break so that you get time to take a coffee or something. You may attend the whole webinar, and I would encourage you to do so, or you can also attend the presentations you think you have the most interest at. If during the presentation you've got questions, please do not hesitate to use this Q&A button you've got at the bottom of your screen to write down your questions, and we will be happy then to ask them to the speakers when appropriate, or maybe during the Q&A session. At the end of each presentation, we will also try to keep at least a 10 minutes Q&A so that you can ask your questions, make comments, be directly in touch with the speakers. To do so, I will explain it again, but we will ask you to kindly use this raise hand button that you've got as well at the bottom of the screen, because as I said, when you were entering, you are all on mute, sorry, shall I say. So if you click on this button, we know that you want to speak, and then we'll be able to unmute you. And then if ever you've got any other comments, requests whatsoever, please feel free to use the chat. So if everything's clear for everyone, then let's start and kick off the afternoon with the very first presentation, and with Adrian Stanciu. So Adrian is a highly experienced consultant in organizational development, and so he's located in Romania. His expertise, based also on his own professional experience, for instance, as former CEO of the company Xerox, has led him to work with more than 50 organizations of various size and industry. Adrian is also the founding partner of a consulting company in Romania, Ascendis, and of quite famous leadership training programs, Erudio and Erisma. I hope my pronunciation is not too bad. Finally, Adrian is also involved into the academic world, being lately the co-founder of the Maastricht School of Management in Romania, where he teaches managing cultural diversity and leadership and change. And we are very pleased also to have him as a partner of our Human Synergistics offices in Romania, Hungary, and Serbia. So hello, Adrian. Thank you very much for being here today. It's great to see you.
Hello, Marie.
So today you're gonna further explain us a very key topic actually during those troubled times, how to manage uncertainty. So Adrian, the mic is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Marie. Hello, everybody. I hope you hear me well. I apologize for, I have a bad Zoom background here. It moves. I'm on holiday actually, so I found a place where it's more quiet and with good GSM coverage so that I could do this presentation for you. Please forgive me for wearing my sunglasses, but it's extremely sunny. I just cannot do without them. Okay, so great. So I want to kickstart this this discussion with one exercise, and for this you'll need a pen and paper, and or maybe you can write it on your phone or something if you don't have pen and paper handy. But I ask you please to write it down. It's important that you write it down. So my first question here is to guess these numbers. You have 7 questions here, and please guess these numbers. I know that you don't know the exact answer. I expect you not to know the exact answer, but just give me your best educated guess. Please don't Google it. I know you can use Google, but try to guess as well as you can these 7 numbers. Okay, so let's say 3 minutes for this, 2 minutes for this. Please write them down. Okay, and now I ask you to do something else, and this is to give me a 95% confidence interval. What does a 95% confidence interval mean? I expect that you didn't know the exact answer. I'm actually very certain that you didn't know the exact answer. So you might say, for instance, for the, I don't know, the average depth of Lake Erie, you gave a number, let's say 100 meters. And the next question is, are you really sure it's 100 meters? And the answer is obvious. I'm not sure, it was just a guess. Okay, but give me an interval for which you are 90% sure it's true. Let's say between 50 and 200 or something like that. I'm not sure that it's 100, but I'm 95% sure it's between 50 and 200, something like that, yeah? So add another 2 numbers to the left and to the right of the number that you first wrote down, in such a way that the interval that they comprise, it has 95%, you are 95% confident that your real answer is within that interval. That's called the 95% confidence interval. So another 2 minutes for this, yeah? You need to end up with 3 times 7 numbers, like 21 numbers, yeah? The 7 initially plus the 2 interval for each of them.
I think we can move ahead, yes.
Okay, so now I'm going to give you the real answers. And Dino is going to start the poll. And the question is, how many did you get correctly? By correctly, I mean how many answers, in how many cases the real answer falls within your 95% confidence interval. Probably you didn't get any answer 100% correctly, but 95% correctly. How many did you get correctly? Please answer this poll and click submit. Okay, ready? Do we have answers, Dino?
No, not yet. We have 32% of people who voted until now. So let's wait a minute that everybody finishes.
Yeah, well, yeah, maybe not everybody answered the question. Some
Yes.
people maybe didn't vote.
How many
Okay.
how many persons do you want? We have 44% until now.
44 persons.
Yes.
We have only 35 participants. 31 participants. Okay, so show us the results, Dino. Okay, so here you see the results. We have, let me count, 10, 21, 28 answers. We have 28 answers, 28 people answered. 38% didn't get any, one of them got one, two of them got 19%, sorry. 38% didn't get any, 19% got one, 19% got two, etc. Nobody got 7, nobody got 6. Now, here's what this exercise will tell you. It's very clear that you didn't know the answers. It was virtually impossible to know any of the answers correctly. At the same time, when I ask you to give me a 95% confidence interval, you should have gotten pretty much the correct interval. Maybe not the exact answer, but the interval. Why? Because it's a 95% confidence. You are 95% confident that you got it right. When you answer those questions, you are 95% confident that you got it right. So if you're really 95% right, there are 28 people answering, 7 questions each. That means that there are about 200 answers. From 200 answers, we should have 10 wrong answers, 10. And basically we have most of the answers are wrong. What does this tell you? It doesn't tell you that you don't know your geography or something, because nobody knows that much geography. But it tells you that you think you know even when you don't know. And this is the problem with our mind in times of uncertainty. Our mind hates uncertainty, and we try to find certainty where it exists not, where it is not. And there are two elements at play here, and both of them generate this phenomenon. The first of one is the definition of information. By definition, information is something that decreases uncertainty. It means, if I tell you that tomorrow the sun will rise, this is true, but it's not information, because you are absolutely certain that the sun will rise tomorrow. I didn't reduce your uncertainty in any way. If I tell you that tomorrow you will win the lottery and you can depend on this information, then that's a lot of information, because you have one chance in 13 million to win the lottery in pretty much any big lottery systems on the market. So that's a lot of information. It's a very small chance. If I reduce a lot of uncertainty, if I tell you that you're going to win the lottery, but I reduce no uncertainty if I tell you that the sun is going to rise. So information is not about truth, but it's about uncertainty. And the mind hates uncertainty. You could have said, let's say the highest elevation in Vanuatu. Where the hell is Vanuatu? I don't even know where it is. What is that? Is this really a country? Well, okay, let's assume it is. Highest elevation. The lowest I know of is 0. If it's at sea level, is maybe 3 meters. The highest I know of is Chomolungma, 8,800 meters. It must be somewhere in between, let's say between 100 and 5,000 meters. But then the mind says, what kind of information is this between 100 and 5,000 meters? There are countless mountains that fit into this range.
Thank you.
Somebody asked me to comment a little bit on the idea of information as a means of reducing uncertainty. This is basically the definition of information. Actually, the definition of the one bit of information is the quantity of information that reduces uncertainty by 50%. That's 1 bit of information. So if you have a phenomenon that can have 2 states, and I tell you for sure that is going to present itself to you in state number 1, I gave you 1 bit of information. If I tell you that you are going to win the lottery tomorrow, which has an uncertainty level of 1 in 13 million, I give actually 13 megabytes of information with that information. So information by definition is the capacity of reducing uncertainty. And information is important because we cannot deal with uncertainty. This is why information is power, because the power of reducing uncertainty is a very important power. And our mind also deals with uncertainty, generates stress and the threat response. And we respond to uncertainty the way we respond to dangers to our existence to some extent. It doesn't mean that it's the same intensity, but the same psychological mechanisms apply. So having said that, let me go further down the presentation. So as I said, one issue here is that you will not be inclined to give very large confidence intervals, because the large confidence intervals present you with very little information, therefore reduces uncertainty to very small extent. And you just don't feel like that's a useful guess to make. What's the point of guessing something that fits 80% of the mountains of the world or 90% of the mountains of the world? It doesn't only apply to Vanuatu, it will apply to Kilimanjaro, it will apply to any peak in the Carpathians and the Alps, etc., etc. So what kind of information is that? But this is the level of certainty that you have, and this is the answer that you should have given. The other phenomenon here is that, as I said earlier, you tend to latch, your mind tends to latch on the first number that comes to mind, and that mind becomes an anchor. The number becomes an anchor, and therefore you cannot think outside that anchor anymore. And to make you more comfortable about this doesn't just apply to you. On March 13th, the Center for Disease Control in the United States made what they call an expert poll. So they asked 18% virusology experts in the US, the most famous virusology experts in the US. We are talking here Johns Hopkins, Stanford Medical School, Nobel laureates, yeah, to give them an estimate on how many cases they should expect to have in the US over the next 3 weeks. 3 weeks, yeah. So they asked them to look 3 weeks in the future. This was mid-March, yeah. So the epidemic was in full swing in many countries already. There were already some good pieces of information available, like the rate of spread and others like that. And they asked the 18 most famous virusologists in the US to give an estimate. The consensus estimate was around 18,000 cases. The reality was about 250,000, 3 weeks later. Not only that, but from the 18 specialists, only 3 of them guessed. They also asked a confidence interval of 95%. And only 3 of them guessed the confidence interval. The other 15 were very far away from the confidence interval, further and further away, but some of them extremely far away from the confidence interval. From the 3 that got the confidence interval right, 1 had a confidence interval of 500,000 cases. So basically he said, hell if I know. And the other 2 had confidence intervals between 300 and 150,000 cases. So very large approximations. Basically these 3 at least said, you know what, we cannot predict. But the other 15 predicted, and predicted with very small confidence intervals. They were pretty sure that they are right. And they were enormously wrong, enormously wrong. And these are the brightest minds of this domain in the United States. this is what happens. We think that we know, but we really don't know. You see now people going back to their jobs, going back to their lives, and they behave as if they know that this, what will happen, and that this has passed and we are getting back to normal. But actually we are not, and we do not know what the reality will have in store for us in the future. So lesson number one is there is a lot of uncertainty now. We live in the mother of all uncertainties, and our mind plays tricks on us. Our mind will tell us, well, it's not so uncertain as you think, and it will latch on bits of certainty and extrapolate from those to make us think that the future is certain, although it's not certain in any shape or in any form of shape. Next, my next question is this. It's another small exercise. Please read the text and give me one number. Okay, so the idea is the test is not 100% accurate, it's only 99% accurate, and the rest is false positives. It does not give false negatives, but it does give 1% false positives. So there is a chance that you actually do not have HIV. And the question is, how worried should you be? What do you think is the chance? What is the chance that you actually do have HIV? Give me a probability number. What is the probability that you expect that you do? Great. So you see, 26% think that there is no chance. So although you have a test that tells you that you're 99% likely to have HIV, there is no chance. 16% say less than 2%, 16% between 2 and 5, and so on and so forth. And then you have a few that think that the ratios are far higher. So I'd like to take a few explanations. I want to hear somebody that said 0%, somebody that had said 76 to 98%, somebody that said 100%, and somebody that said less than 2%. Let's start with 0. Somebody that said 0. Can we have an explanation, please? Raise your hand if you want to explain.
Please, we just need a volunteer. Don't worry about your answer. Thank you.
Okay, so we have 2 people. Can you give the microphone to one of the 2 people who want to intervene, please?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Allison Beckles.
Hello.
Hi. So
Hey.
my reason for saying no chance is because I'm quite aware of my own behavior. So knowing my own behavior, I can be reasonably sure, very sure that I have no chance of that the test is incorrect.
Okay. So you're saying I'm not just any random person in the street. I have a certain behavior, and knowing my behavior, there is no chance. It's for sure I'm in the region of the false positive, right?
Yeah.
That you're thinking.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's hear somebody with one of the others.
Okay, I had 0% exactly due to the same reason as the previous person.
Yeah.
So my behavior is mainly the reason that I believe that I will not have the.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you. Let's have for one of the others. Let's go to the other end. Somebody said between 76 and 98. Somebody said between 76 and 98. Why do you think that? Sorry?
Hello, my name is Islam. I'm here in Romania.
Hello?
Basically, I stated the part with that 76% to 98% because I believe a little bit in the idea of the context. Because yeah, like I went to take the test, and in the same time, it depends a lot on what kind of doctor like I am actually approaching as well for such a thing. What the clinic has a kind of repetition that they do like solid tests, and for that somehow also like if I have any kind of previous experience with that, so most likely I would be worried that I might have it actually because the test is quite positive and the percentage is not quite high. So the context can tell a lot if it's in that case or not. Thank you.
Okay. Can I have somebody who said less than 2%, please? Somebody who said less than 2%. No?
No, no one.
Okay, so let me tell you how this works. Actually, you are missing a very important piece of information here, which is what is the incidence of HIV in the general population? So Alison, who answered, I know my own behavior, she puts herself, by knowing her own behavior, she puts herself in a low risk category of the population. And she said, I'm in a low risk category. I'm not just anybody from the street. But even if you are anybody from the street, assuming that you are anybody from the street, that is completely random, then you have to ask yourself, what is the incidence of HIV in the general population? And in Europe, if you're European, it's about 6 in 100,000, the incidence of HIV. So slightly below 1 in 10,000, let's say 1 in 10,000 to make it easy. That means that if you give this test to 10,000 random people in the street, you will get 101 positive answers. You'll get 1 real positive and 100 false positives. So the chance that you even if you are randomly selected, the chance that you have HIV is actually below 1%. It's 1 over 101%. And if you are not randomly selected, like Alison said, but I'm not any person in the street, then if you're in a lower risk group even than the average person, then your risk is even lower than that. But even if you're Mr. Average or Mrs. Average from the street, your risk is below 1%. Before taking the test, your risk is 1 in 10,000. After taking the test, your risk is below 1%. So it's 100% higher, but it's still not 99% or 78%. This is something called Bayesian statistics. It's just an example of how our mind does not work well with random events. So now we are in this particular situation. We have random events in high uncertainty, and our mind is very ill-equipped to deal with both. So basically, one thing that I recommend everybody to do in this situation is to start to educate ourselves on how the mind deals with random events and how to understand random events, and maybe be more prepared to read the data, to read the articles, to interact with this enormous flow of information that comes our way and is sometimes either misleading or simply incoherent. You are required to make a choice between A and B. So you have to make a decision. It's a simple decision. You should decide A or you should decide B. How does this work? The outcome of your decision will not depend just on your answer, but will depend on answer of somebody else from this webinar whom I would choose at random. And it will work like this. If you chose A and the other party chose A, both of you lose 1 point. Let's assume that this 1 point means something. Let's assume that it's 100 euros. So say you chose A, the other party chose A, both of you lose 100 euros. If you choose B and the other party chooses A, you lose 200 euros, the other party gains 200 euros. And symmetrically, if you choose A and the other party chooses B, you make 200 euros and the other party loses 200 euros. And then if you, sorry, not this one, here. And if both of you choose B, both of you make 100 euros, okay? So A, both of you lose 100 euros. B, both of you make 100 euros. You choose A, the other B. You make 200 euros, the other party loses 200 euros. You choose B, the other party chooses A. You lose 200 euros, the other party makes 200 euros. So tell me what you would choose in such a game. What would be your choice? 30 seconds. Okay, so we have 86% of those who answered B, and 14% of them who answered A. Can we have one argument for A and one argument for B? Who wants to argue for B? Who wants to argue for A?
Thank you. Got one volunteer.
Hello, I can give an answer for A.
Okay.
I just summed up how much I can get. So -2 plus 1. And
Okay.
so it seems that in this case, I'm maximizing the gain that I can have or minimizing the loss.
The loss, yeah, okay. So you're saying if I choose A, I'm in a better position, right? I can maximize the gain or minimize the loss.
Statistically, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you. One answer for B, one argument for B. No, nobody wants to argue for B?
Apparently not. We don't have any volunteers, unfortunately.
Okay. Although there were a lot of Bs, huh?
Right? No one really.
Okay, so.
It's gone.
Okay, so let me tell you how this works. This exercise is a very good explanation about how human cooperation works. And it explains a lot of things that you see in society and also in nature. It's an exercise that comes from game theory. Some of you probably took game theory in university with your economics class, maybe others maybe not. It's a very simple game. It's the most basic, but also most famous and most, I would say, important game in game theory. It's called the prisoner's dilemma. And it's important because it explains how human cooperation works. It explains, for instance, how the tragedy of common occurs, what happens with resources that are exploited in common. Generally, they are overexploited. It explains the arms race. It will be best for countries that each of them invest their money in the economy and generate progress, but the first one that invests money in the army can defeat the other country and rob it, and then they will have all the spoils of war, and the other will have a big defeat. So then everybody invests in arms, and everybody is worse off because of that. It explains a lot of situations like this. It also explains, for instance, why dorm rooms, student dorm rooms look the way they look. It would be best that each of the occupants would put a little effort and keep it clean, but then the first one who doesn't put the effort will go for a party, and the other one has to clean for them, so pretty soon nobody cleans. So human cooperation requires, humanity has evolved and been successful because we invented cooperation in large scales. But human cooperation requires that we beat this game. And in order to beat this game, we should all choose B. We should all invest socially in the common good. The problem with choosing B is that it's not the best option. Individually speaking, it's not the best option. The best option is A. And those who chose A made a rational choice. Why? Look a bit here. If you choose A and the other party chooses A, you lose 1 point. Yeah, it's bad. But if you had chosen B, you would have lost 2 points. So it's better to lose 1 point than to lose 2 points. If you choose A and the other party chooses B, you get 2 points. If you had chosen B, you would have gotten only 1. So getting 2 is better than getting 1. So A is the rational choice. But A is the rational choice for the other party too. So pretty soon the game ends here in -1, -1. This is called the Nash equilibrium. It's a position from which it is very difficult. It's easy to get here, but very difficult to escape, because when you try to escape, the first one who makes a move outside of this position loses. So nobody wants to lose. So the whole system ends up here. Why am I telling you this? Because the better choice would be that we both choose B. But the problem with choosing B is that it requires some fundamentals to happen. And one fundamental is that we trust each other, that we trust that the others will choose B as well. And the others see the situation the way we see it. The others see the common good and care for the common good. And most of all, understand that the common good is not achieved at their expense. If you see the position B is better than the position A for all participants. So the common good is not something that requires you to sacrifice yourselves. People do not like to sacrifice themselves. If you ask people to sacrifice themselves for the common good, this is a system that will not last. But we are not asking them in this game to sacrifice themselves for the common good, just to understand that the common good works better for everybody, and then to follow this idea. But for them to follow this idea, they need also some values to happen in the group. And the most important value is trust. I need to trust that the other members of the group understand this and behave in this manner. Otherwise, if only I trust in the common good and the others do not, then I will lose all the way, and I cannot lose all the way. So I will not work for the common good either. People are not altruistic by nature, but they are reciprocally altruistic. That means that I will put my effort in a system where the system pays back. So why do I tell you all this? Because we have built organizations in the past 100 years who are based on individual performance, not the common good, where people are measured individually, where you get your rewards and your promotions and your salary from your own output, not from what you do together with others. You tend to have, to a large extent, individual objectives. If you have objectives that are not individual, they would be either marginal or secondary to your individual objectives. So your first interest in an organization would typically be to forward your own career and to get your numbers in and to do your personal job, irrespective of what the others do. And we have cultivated, generally we have cultivated the cultures of mistrust, in which organizations assume that people are going to make mistakes or are going to somehow maybe be dishonest or take advantage of the organization, and they put all sorts of checks and balances in place to prevent this from happening. I have clients who have put checks and balances in place to shield their organization from events that are extremely rare. Just because it happens once, they invent a whole bureaucracy to make sure it doesn't happen again. So basically, we have built a system that is against this. We have built a system in which the system and the rules and the process takes the place of human interaction and human values in running the organization. Instead of having positive, constructive values that drive the organization, we have rules and processes and the culture based on compliance and command and control that makes people follow the process and follow the rules. This has worked very well for us for more than 100 years in the industrial times, but it works less and less well in modern times and is extremely, extremely resistant to change. And Valer will follow with a presentation about organizations that are immune to change. And I bet you that you will find in those organizations that these key ingredients will be lacking. There will be less trust in the organization. There will be less understanding of the mission and the purpose and the common good of the organization. And there will be less understanding of the individual responsibilities and accountabilities between members of people do not trust that the other members of the organization are going to deliver what they promise or what they expect to deliver. And if these ingredients are missing, whatever else you put in the mixture, the organization cannot function naturally. It needs force, it needs structure, it needs compliance in order to deliver. The problem with compliance, however, is that you can only be compliant with a plan. And if you want to be compliant with a plan, that means that you have a plan that works. That means that you can predict the reality in the future. In times of uncertainty, as I showed you earlier, the mind believes that it has a plan, believes that it has certainty, but it has not. So what you end up with is doing plans after plans after plans and pushing compliance after compliance after compliance. And these plans change every quarter or every 2 months or sometimes every couple of weeks. And what they generate instead of order, they generate chaos and frustration. So what is the answer here? How do you deal with uncertainty? First of all, you need to understand that uncertainty is in times like this, is not only inevitable, but it's much higher than you think. That your mind will try to minimize uncertainty and find patterns of certainty where certainty doesn't exist. The second thing you need to understand is that whenever there is uncertainty in a system, whenever there is chaos in a system, there is a level of the system in which there is more certainty, more predictability. For instance, the purpose of the organization doesn't change. People will still be people. Your core competence will still be your core competence. Your customers will have pretty much the same human needs. Maybe they have changed a little bit with the pandemic, but they are still people with human needs, etc., etc. So there are some things that you can rely on, but they are not on the level on which the organization is planned. Your plans do not deliver certainty anymore, they deliver chaos. So in order to deal with this, what you need to do is to raise the level of the compliance. If you want, you don't need to be compliant on the actions level, but you need to be compliant on the values and principles level. So how do you fill this void? This creates a sort of void. How do you fill it? And this is my last slide. So basically,
Sorry, Adrian?
in terms of, yes?
Sorry to interrupt you, but if you're sharing your screen, then we don't see it. I was not sure whether you were sharing your screen or not.
Sorry. Okay, sorry. Let me.
And I didn't want to interrupt during the explanation.
Can you see it now? Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
This is my last slide. So this is how the system works. If you have a system that is based on compliance, that means that you have a plan and rules that people need to follow. And this is a system that works very well, but it requires predictability in the environment, and it delivers predictability. If you want to have a system that is more agile, more flexible, then you have to relax the rules. But if you relax the rules, how do you create results, performance, and not chaos? And the answer is you need to replace, you need to fill the void with something. What do you fill the void with? Actually, you fill the void with alignment to a common destination, and alignment to a set of values that people believe in that allow them to cooperate in order to achieve that destination. And this kind of alignment, this kind of environment where people understand the purpose and the mission of the organization, they'll feel emotionally attached to the mission of the organization. And they understand the good in the same way, they decode the good in the same way, is what we actually call a constructive culture in the terminology of human synergistics. So basically, we have a lot of data that shows that constructive cultures work better in pretty much any situation. But in times of uncertainty, there is no other way. There is no other way. You could get away with having a more defensive culture in terms of predictability because you could put in a strong command and control system, a strong planning and organizing system, and you could drive a reasonable level of performance through compliance. But in times of uncertainty, compliance gets you nowhere. Not only does it get you nowhere, but it gets you backwards. You will be compliant with things that are actually wrong because your mind will latch onto certainty that doesn't exist. So in times of uncertainty, we actually have to build constructive culture. And what you'll hear with the other presenters will be how organizations resist change and how culture can shape organizations that are less resistant to change and more agile. And then with my US colleagues, you'll hear about a new instrument that is designed to help people understand to which extent the organization is capable of dealing with uncertainty right now in a very, very simple and efficient way. And this is what you'll get through the rest of the webinar. So I close here and I open the floor for questions if there are any, please.
Stay on tune 5 more minutes so that if any of you have question, please feel free to, again, either ask them into the Q&A or raise your hand so that we give you the mic. I know there were some questions. I think it was Laurence who was wondering about the name of the exercise. However, I was not sure which exercise, Laurence, you were referring to. If ever we can give the mic or something, please, do you know? Okay, thank you. That was the exercise with A and B. Okay.
It's called, the exercise is called Prisoner's Dilemma, and it's part of a larger theory called game theory. Game theory is a mathematical theory actually that describes how decision-making works when your decision-making depends not just on your decision, but on decisions of other people who participate in the so-called game. But it has a fundamental assumption behind it. The fundamental assumption is that people would make choices that maximize their individual utility. And this is the assumption that it is behind the whole macroeconomic theory as well. So basically, it assumes that people are what economists call homo economicus, that you are a rational optimizer or maximizer of your personal utility. And this is an assumption that is valid in most of the cases, but it has some important limitations. And one of them is the one that I described, that if you cannot build cooperation in large groups based on this assumption.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you, Adrian, for your answer. I hope it was helpful. We had another question, but I see it was answered already. Okay, do we have any further questions? All right. I maybe had one. It's a very broad question, I must say. So I don't know whether you can make it in the 1 or 2 minutes we've got left. But I was wondering then, to summarize what you said, basically our mind tends to trick us when we face uncertainty because we try to find order where basically sort of there is none. Then what can we do against that? What concretely can we do to change that and to help us to be aware of that and then cope with it?
Yeah, I would say 2 things. One of them is find certainty somewhere else. And this is typically happens by raising the level of awareness, if you want. Mm-hmm. When we do planning and organizing in organization, we typically plan for very narrow objectives. And that means that we are pretty certain that the reality is going to go that way. Mm-hmm. So we can plan into narrow objectives. If we cannot plan into narrow objectives anymore, what we can plan into? We can plan into our mission, probably the mission doesn't change. We can plan into our strategic intent, probably that doesn't change. We can plan into our values and desired organizational culture, probably that doesn't change. So there is a level on which there is certainty. The problem with that level is that it requires a lot of autonomy. Because if you tell people, you know, this is our mission, do your best to achieve this mission, of course, you don't say it right in these terms, but pretty much, then people will have to use their own thinking and their own competence and their own decision-making in order to align themselves to this goal. And this is something that in the past was given by the system. Your job description would tell you what you need to do, but now you have to align and orient yourself. And this opens a whole lot of discussions about, am I competent enough? Do I have the right access to information? Does everybody's personal interests are aligned with the greater good? so we don't have conflicts of interest around. But mostly and foremostly, it raises the question, do we have a culture that allows this kind of interaction to happen? And this is what we in human synergistics call a constructive culture. So for times of uncertainty, constructive culture is not the only ingredient by far, but is the, I would say, the most essential ingredient, the basic ingredient. Without a constructive culture, all the rest will not function.
Yeah, to enable this flexibility you were talking of in cooperation between groups and avoid this individuality of people who will then fall into this trap again of making things, thinking they know when they don't know, etc.
Yeah, yeah. So you need to open up the space for uncertainty, and this opens up this space also for chaos. How do you organize the chaos? And the way to organize it is to give it direction, and you give it the direction of the mission, the direction of the culture that supports the mission. So if we know what we want and we know how to cooperate in order to get there, we will solve the problems in the way. There will be problems, there will be situations, but we will be able to deal with them.
Okay. Well, thank you, Adrian.
I'm not against process in itself, but the point I'm trying to make is that planning in general assumes predictability. It requires and assumes predictability, and process. You can have a process that is built on uncertainty, obviously. How to deal with uncertainty, you can build a process around that. But planning in general assumes predictability. And what I've seen with my customers and with the world around me is that people are desperately looking for the predictability that will allow them to return to the previous methods of management. And this predictability just isn't there anymore, and is not going to be there for a significant amount of time. And my argument is that they should start looking at dealing with the situations differently.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Adrian, for this presentation, as well as for the questions and participation from our participants. That was very great and very interesting insights. And I think actually we're going to meet again this uncertainty topic in the two other presentations, though probably implicitly, but this is something we're going to keep along the afternoon. So now we have a 30-minute break before the second presentation, which will precisely focus on organizational culture change, and Valère will be the one introducing it to us. So enjoy the break, and let's see you again at 3 p.m. Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you,
everybody.
Thank you. Bye.